As Jesse watches down, I'm sure that he's delighted to know that the Montez case has now become ingrained and indoctrinated into the Department of Corrections.
Jesse Montez didn't live to see the reforms made possible because he spoke out against the conditions disabled inmates faced in Colorado prisons. Montez was partially paralyzed and found himself confined to his cell because for him, the prison was inaccessible.
There was no yard that he could access. Religious services often weren't accessible. Even basic areas like the dining areas, the job areas, the program areas weren't accessible.
In the early 1990s, Montez filed suit against the Department of Corrections for not complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
It made a bad experience much, much worse for these individuals and was very punitive.
Within about a year, Paula Greisen signed on as counsel and eventually recruited a team of litigators.
One afternoon, about 5 or 6 years ago, she called me up and asked me if I'd go to lunch with her the next day. Said she had a small prisoner case. She was wondering if I could help her on.
The Montez suit grew to a class action case that has spanned nearly 2 decades.
A 3,000 member class action against the Colorado Department of Corrections, to which 2 federal judges in Colorado were assigned, along with a team of special masters. At that point, there were something over 4,000 docket entries in the case. A 2-month trial was forthcoming, and frequent road trips throughout Colorado were planned.
It has taken a large percentage of my time, certainly in years where there are compliance hearings, but it's gratifying to see the enormous changes that we've made.
It's protecting the rights of the people that have the least power. That's the most important.
Diane King is equally dedicated to ensuring the civil liberties and civil rights of prisoners in Colorado. King took on the case of a Muslim inmate who was denied his right to religious freedom.
He wanted to be able to have an Islamic diet, what's called a halal diet, in prison. And he also wanted to be able to wear a kufi, which is the religious head garb of a Muslim man, and the DOC was not allowing him to do either of those things.
She won that case, but says the work goes on to preserve and protect the individual rights of those behind bars.
Instead of always progressing and getting better, we seem to move backwards a lot with regard to how we treat individuals, and especially those that are incarcerated are the ones who I think society thinks are the least deserving of all of these rights and liberties that we have.
In 2005, a young guy, Sean Vigil, was arrested for the first time and sent to the Denver County Jail. Sean was deaf, and at no time during his incarceration was he ever provided a sign language interpreter at the jail. Did they perform any kind of medical or mental health intake on him? They isolated him in segregation in a cell at the end of a long pod, and he sat in that cell, drew a picture of himself crying, and ultimately hung himself.
Greisen is now representing several plaintiffs in a suit against the Denver County Jail for denying basic accommodations to disabled prisoners.
Prisoners are an easy group of people to forget about in terms of their civil liberties. It's easy to forget that they're human beings, just like the rest of us, and that there's some basic level of respect and decent treatment that they're entitled to. We lose the fabric of who we are once we forget that, for any group, this group included. And this is where Paula and Diane have stepped in and just done a magnificent job of making sure that doesn't happen.
Paula Greisen and Diane King are the recipients of the ACLU of Colorado's Edward Sherman Award for outstanding legal work to make sure the rights guaranteed by our Constitution aren't denied to those convicted of crimes.
I'm very grateful for the award. It's a passion for all of us because I think it's important for society, and what we do is, I think, parallel to the work that the ACLU does, enforcing individual rights.
It's a tremendous honor to receive this award, and I'm humbled and grateful to the ACLU.
The Department of Corrections settled the Montez case and agreed to architectural changes to make our prisons accessible for all inmates, including those with physical limitations and visual or hearing impairments. But the case continues and will until the DOC reaches full compliance with the settlement and Colorado's prisons no longer discriminate against disabled inmates like Jesse Montez.
I remember him writing to me once saying, "Miss Greisen, I'm not a bad person. I just did a bad thing, but I shouldn't have to live like this." And he was right.